Hey guys, Nicole here. What is the worst advice you've ever gotten? Well, today Dee Dee brought that topic to the table. We really dug into some of the things that we say when we think we're trying to be helpful, but we actually cause more harm. So what are some phrases that we say routinely or some advice that we give in order to try to help the situation, but we really end up hurting?
So today is an interesting topic. It's about bad advice. Bad advice we've been given and bad advice that we have probably given to other people. And I thought, let's talk about this a little bit because we say these words. So in the last episode, we talked about how sometimes telling somebody don't be afraid is silly because how does that stop them from being afraid? But what are some of the phrases that we say to people that is terrible advice? And let's talk about why that could be a bad thing to say and something we could say instead of saying that. So one of the ones I thought about also was telling somebody when they graduate high school, you're going to change the world. Why could that be? And maybe that's not advice, but it kind of falls into the phrases that we say to people that maybe we shouldn't say.
Yeah. I think when people are mourning that there is a tendency to, because nobody really knows what to say, but people maybe give advice like, it's going to get better every day. So that's something that we say. And no, they may have a much harder time 5 days down the road, a month down the road, depending on their loss. So we say things just to connect with someone or attempt to connect with them or to let them know that we care. And it's a terrible thing to say.
Yeah. I had that one down too. Time heals all wounds.
Yes.
Or, well, there's other fish in the sea. If it's a breakup.
One of the things that I have said many times, like when somebody turns like 30 or somebody turns 40, I say the best is yet to come, which that's been truth for me so far, but yet that's not necessarily true in their life. They may have really had their best years in their 20s.
But what are some of the detriments to saying this? So telling someone who's graduating high school or graduating college, entering a new phase in life, saying, you're going to change the world.
Yeah, that the expectations are pretty high there.
Yeah.
So when they're unable to land a job that they they are leaving with the perspective that there's expectations on their shoulder for doing something great. And so they start feeling a lot of disappointment.
Yes, absolutely. And you tell them, oh, you are going to love college. Those are going to be the best years of your life. They may go freshman year and think, this is terrible. Am I doing college wrong? I'm lonely. I'm homesick. I don't like my classes.
That's it. So the fact that you took it on what happens to them when we say things like that. Am I doing it wrong? They start thinking something's wrong with them.
Yes.
Because what we've told them it's going to be, they set out with that expectation. And then when they're not feeling that sense of fulfillment or joy or satisfaction, then they start feeling like, what am I doing wrong? Because that is that's what people say.
Well, isn't it true when you have a baby too, and you're exhausted and you're up many hours of the night, you're not sleeping much, and people are like, oh, these were my favorite times. It's so sweet. And you're like, I'm sorry, I think I have like spit up in my hair and I haven't changed clothes in 2 days. Is this really the best times of your life? Now, since we don't have little babies anymore, of course we look back on it fondly, but
there was one time that I had a group of girls that came to my door. They were just going door to door and wanted to talk about their faith with other people. And they found out that I had 4 children, and they go, oh, like, don't you feel so blessed? Children are such a blessing. And I'm like, yeah, every day. I can't tell you I feel that way. I mean, it's okay. They're great. I'm hanging in there. I wasn't in the place to be like, but yet when they were talking to me, and then I shut the door and I was like, should I be feeling more blessed right now? Because,
yes.
But they were telling me I should be. So then I had to evaluate if I was in a failure place, because I was just stinking tired when that person came to the door.
Yes. So what do you say when somebody's entering a new phase of life? Like, what would be good, like a good sentiment to give them when they're graduating high school, graduating college?
Well, we have to be honest about how difficult transition could be.
Yes.
Like, if we just make everything sound like it's wonderful, let's even say getting married.
Yes.
You know, getting married, moving out on your own, getting a new job, graduating college, all of those things, it could be amazing and it could be really, really hard. And so for us to blow off the fact that transition is difficult, trying something new can be hard, learning a new skill or communicating with different people than what you've communicated with before can be hard. So what I feel like is good advice that I try to give to college students is find community.
Yes.
Because what gets really hard is when you're in your head by yourself believing that something's wrong with you.
Yes.
So being a new mom, if you don't have community also sharing their struggles and supporting each other and coming together, you know, taking that walk, pushing strollers together, then you feel like you're doing it all by yourself and you must be doing something wrong because this person is supposed to bring you so much joy and yet you're feeling so stinking tired, maybe sad, maybe, you know, and lonely. So finding community, that always is one of the things I feel like is an excellent piece of advice so that you don't feel by yourself.
Yeah, that's great. Because community changes our world. Truly, it does. So that's fantastic. I do think it's important. What we're trying to do is validate them and tell that person how incredible we think they are and how special they are to us. And so instead of saying, you're going to change the world, why don't we say, I am so proud of you. You have worked really hard in high school. You've worked really hard in college. I've enjoyed watching you grow up, or, you know, like, say the things to them that are really on your heart instead of setting goals that are going to be difficult to achieve.
And another way is coming in and just saying, I support you.
Yes.
Not that I have expectations of you to be able to accomplish something or pushing through a finish line, but I'm here to support you. That's really what people need to hear.
Right.
Is that they're loved and supported.
Yes.
So I will tell you, I'm going to go back, and that one of the worst times that my mom tried to give me advice and it tore me up is when I was having breastfeeding issues with my first daughter. And I had mastitis and I was feverish and I was miserable. And my mom just was trying to love me well because she knew how miserable I was. She didn't want to see her daughter. Like, I was sick. And she said, just stop breastfeeding. Just stop, Nicole. You don't have to do this anymore. Just stop today and it's going to get better. Okay. Now, whether I was at the point where I would have decided to stop or not, that was a personal decision. But what I felt by her is unsupported, even though she was trying to make me feel supported because I didn't want to stop at that point. I wanted to try to figure out how to make it work. And so by her trying to be loving and encouraging in that area, it actually made me feel unsupported by her, which hurt a lot. And I was in a really hard place. So that's one of the things to think about when we go to somebody and we try to give them advice. If they're in a place and they have an event going on in their life, is what you're saying to them, although you feel like you're loving them, is it actually making them feel unloved or unsupported?
It reminded me of something I read that said, it was two people talking, and one person said, how can you be depressed? There's so much beauty in the world. And the other person said, how can you have asthma? There's so much oxygen in the world. And I thought, well, from that person who's going through depression, it may feel like they're grasping for air, grasping for like a little shard of joy. And so, but we tell people that, like, oh, well, just look at all the good things in your life, which is a good thing to do. But we need to hear them first, you know, like somebody starts to open up and share their heart. I'm really struggling. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling depressed about this. Oh, but why don't you just write down everything you're grateful for?
Right. Yes.
So sometimes it's not necessarily bad advice, but it's untimely.
Well, and that would be the one that came to my mind is when you have a teenager that it's tomorrow the paper's due and they start writing it and they're completely overwhelmed. And so that's the wrong time to say, you know, you should have started this last week.
Right.
I mean, what point will that make at that very second? Right. That is one of those things that you just don't say right there. You can talk about it after the paper's turned in, they get a good night's sleep, you want to sit down and have a conversation together, but in that moment will not help.
Yeah, and don't we as moms do that all the time? We give great advice too late. Like a kid runs, you know, they're running through the house with their socks on and you hear a thud and you're like, oh, don't run with your socks on. You might fall. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. Or they eat a package of Oreos and they feel sick. And then you're like, you shouldn't have ate those Oreos. As if like, duh.
Yeah. So sometimes it's not bad advice or a bad thing to say, but when you don't say it at the right time, or we're not even mindful that we're not saying it at the right time, then it can cause harm and hurt feelings. What about the one that you mentioned? It's going to get better tomorrow, or the time heals all wounds. When somebody's sad and grieving, when somebody is hurting, really sad, it's hard to know what to say. What we want to do, I don't think people give bad advice or say things at the wrong time because they want to hurt somebody.
Absolutely not.
I think it comes from a good place. I know I've wanted to help and then in turn like hurt hearts instead. So what do we say whenever somebody's hurting?
Well, first I try to just say I'm going to pray for them and commit to doing it actively. Because most of the time there's not. When somebody is mourning, when somebody is physically hurting, when somebody's going through a traumatic relationship breakup, there's not a lot that we can say that what we want to do is remove the pain they're feeling. That's our ultimate goal. Like, how can I hate that this person that I care about is unhappy or miserable. So therefore, what the thought is how can I help them, like elevate them to the level where they're not quite as sad, which most of the time we can't do that. You know, so mourning's one example. Having a friend that's going through a divorce, that's another time that I have learned through mistakes over the years that listening is my best bet, because I can't help them get over the breakup of their marriage.
Right.
That's the journey they're on right now. So the best thing I can be is a listening ear and love them well, and not make sure I don't create a codependent relationship, because they're going to have to figure some things out. Right. But in my olden days, I would used to just try to continue to give advice, like to try to help, where I wasn't in a position to do that.
Right. Or like telling them not to think about something. You know, if it was an affair and they're talking about something else they found, well, you just need to try not to think about it. Oh, okay. Well, you try not to think about that, you know? Like allowing somebody to talk through something, I think it's really important.
To process, so that they're able to process it.
Yes.
Stuffing it, because ultimately we want them not to hurt anymore, which means we want them to stuff it away instead of like bring it to light so they're able to let it go, truly be able to live beyond that event that happened.
It's almost like if we love somebody enough to allow them space to express their thoughts and emotions and feelings, it doesn't need to be anything that we say to them, but just allowing them that space is loving them well.
You made a comment about a gratitude list, which I liked that you said that, because it brought to my mind another thing. How, let's say someone they're an athlete and they have an extreme injury that puts them out of the sport. Mm-hmm. So then a natural thing for some people to say aren't you so lucky that you were able to blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Like, as if they're trying to say, like, be grateful for the time you did get to spend that sport in that sport, or be grateful for the time you were with that person or had that pet or whatever. But where they're at right now, that doesn't help.
Right. Yeah, because they're upset about that loss. So acknowledging where someone is in that moment and then speaking into that. Yeah, that's important.
And maybe not speaking at all. Mm-hmm. I think where we really, as we're telling these different examples, there's a lot of times that we shouldn't say things. We should just show support and love and presence, but without feeling like we need to fill some void with our voice. Because sometimes there's just not a place for us to fill at that time.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I had a miscarriage, I remember somebody saying, well, at least the baby hadn't been born. And I was like, oh. I don't think once you are a mom loving that child, you're a mom loving that child. You know, it was almost like then I felt guilty that I was sad that I had lost the baby. And that just put me in a weird place.
Yeah. Another one that people say with miscarriages, when you have other children, aren't you so glad, or aren't you so lucky that you have, because I had 3 children when I started having miscarriages. I already had 3 on the ground. Like, aren't you so lucky that you have 3 children? Mm-hmm. You know, think if you didn't have any. Well, that doesn't change the emptiness that I was feeling with that loss.
You know, I think all of these things are really good if we let the person know that they are heard and they are loved first. Then it opens up their hearts to, maybe in the same conversation, maybe in a few days, at heeding that advice, being open to a perspective shift, like we talked about perspective last time, because that has to happen. And we want people to speak truth into our lives, but it almost puts more responsibility on us, because we may have to have 2 conversations or 3 conversations to really love that person well.
And I think praying before we have those conversations, like before we're, you know, if we're pulling up to someone's house and we know that there is hard stuff going on in that house, just spending some time and saying to the Lord, I need you to direct what comes out of my mouth. Yeah. And not to have me direct it, because I don't always say the right thing. So really, that being able to pray about it, ask God to lead you, puts you in a mind space to quiet you and allow him to show through when you're sitting down and having those conversations.
Yeah. Okay, what about this one? This one's a little controversial, I think. Like, some people feel passionate on either side of this, but don't ever go to bed angry. What are your thoughts on that one? Is that good advice or bad advice?
So I will say that's not advice that my husband and I follow. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're sometimes annoyed with each other when we lay down, and then the next morning we are not anymore. So I'm a true believer that there's a lot of times a good night's rest can bring me back to perspective.
Yes.
So therefore, both of us just need a good night's rest. Mm-hmm. And if it's something that's still an issue, then we do continue to talk about it. Luckily, I don't think it disturbs either one of our sleep. We're both like pretty hearty sleepers. And so that is not advice that we have followed in our marriage, and I haven't seen it to be a detriment. Mm-hmm. What about you?
I feel like it really depends on the people. And it depends on where you are in that moment. If you are very tired, if there are a lot of things on your mind, that is not the time to get into a deep conversation that could lead to an argument. or to continue an argument. But some people will say you stay up all night long if you have to resolve it. And I just think that might work if it's two people that are super thought out, very guarded in their responses and how they respond to things. But if one or both of the people kind of have a short fuse and a hot head, then that's not going to lead to anything.
No, the
good.
more tired you get, the more that just comes, your tongue gets quicker and less thoughtful.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be interesting if we had somebody on here that lived strictly by that.
Yes.
And to get that perspective, because that isn't a perspective that we've ever followed, and it has worked out okay. Like I haven't felt like we've ever put ourselves in a worse position because we didn't push through that night and get it all out there.
Yes. What about when you tell somebody, well, just follow your heart?
Yeah, that's actually terrible advice.
Yes.
Because
but you hear it all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. Our hearts are so deceiving. I mean, we talked about in our last podcast, perspective, for example. Yes. So perspective can change the way our hearts drive us. And just because we have a perspective that's based on our experiences and the people around us, but that doesn't mean that's the right direction to go. So I think follow your heart is a terrible piece of advice. I do believe the Holy Spirit drives our gut instincts. So tapping into that is wise, but also finding wise counsel when there's big decisions to be made so that you're able to talk things through with your peers or your mentor is super important too, because my heart, it could take me lots of different places.
Yes.
What about you?
Yeah, that is not one of my favorite things, but I hear it all the time. I feel like young people are bombarded with that message. Just follow your heart, follow your heart. I think what is important to say is if you're getting like signals that something is off, or that you have like little warning signs or something feels weird about the situation, then pay attention to that. Or if they're trying to make a decision and you would say like, well, follow your heart on what it is you want to pursue. I think the question is, well, what are you passionate about? What are you interested in? What are your gifts? What are your talents? Let's look at those things. But to just say follow your heart, I think you're trying to tell somebody to trust the Holy Spirit inside of you, trust that innate feeling of, maybe something's wrong here, or maybe this is an opportunity I should pursue. But yeah, just follow your heart. Sometimes I shouldn't follow my heart in the same day. No,
and our hearts are totally, it could change. I mean,
Yes.
Our heart for something can change. And sometimes it can change. I think in the last podcast we talked about that when we talk to people with different perspectives, that we're able to really decide on, is what I know or feel to be true. You're able to get different perspectives to think about it. But follow your heart, I almost feel like that's like, get a tattoo. Now, I have a tattoo, so I'm not saying anything against tattoos. But if you were following your desire at that moment and putting it on your body, you would have a long-term issue because our preferences change, our style changes, how we feel about things or people change. Follow your heart is terrible advice, because it's only about where you're at in that moment, and what sounds whimsical or fun or loving. And that is, you never know. I mean, if I would have, for example, my husband getting a vasectomy. So if you talk about following your heart, then there was a moment that I was like, yes, let's do it. And then later on, I was like, no, I don't want to do it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, because our perspectives change. So if we just went on following our hearts, like, it's just not a wise wise thing to say. We need to stop saying that.
A believer would say, learn to listen to the Lord's voice, right? But that one, your heart can lead you in some bad places. Okay, maybe the last one. But what about when somebody is harping on something that you have caused pain to them, you've hurt them, and they just will not let it go, or something's just bothering them and they bring it up over and over and over. And you say, you just need to get over that. So maybe they do just need to get over that, but saying that to somebody who
is not helpful.
Is not helpful.
What we really mean by that, I mean, ultimately, is you need to deal with it. You need to address how you're feeling and figure out where it comes from and how you can manage to go in front of it so that it's gone. But just getting over it, I think I've said it before, but to me that means tuck it away so that it's not bugging me anymore.
It's almost like, just stop talking to me about this. Be done with that.
Yeah, that is another one that is terrible advice, because somebody can't just get over something that they're feeling very hurt about. They can start ignoring it, but boy, it shows its head again.
So one thing I think would be a good thing to say is, I can tell you think about this a whole lot. Why is it still bothering you? Why does it still upset you? Asking those questions to get them to talk about it. Because the reason they're like playing it over and over in their head or can't let it go isn't because they want to hold on to it. There's something else behind it. There's a reason they're holding on to it. And it's probably a fear that they might not even realize is a fear that they're holding on to it for.
One of the things I like to say in those situations where maybe one person would say, get over it, but I like to try to start asking the questions of, what do you think can be done that could make you feel differently? Most of the time, the person doesn't even have an answer to that. It's almost like they feel like they want certain retribution, but they're not even sure what that is. But until they acknowledge that there's really nothing that can be done in retribution in order to fix the way they're feeling, then they can start addressing how they're feeling. Because then it's really about the state of their heart. It's not about the other person making good or making things better. Right. So when I can tell that there's events that keep coming up, like a topic that keeps coming up, this pain, being able to just be like, okay, what's going to change? What can change this? Most of the time, it's nothing.
That's a great question, though. What can make a change in this situation? Beautiful. Because that opens the door up to so many different things.
Yeah.
So I just started thinking about all the bad advice or the phrases that we use that we don't mean to cause harm, but can hurt somebody's feelings. A breakup? Oh, you are better off without that person. Well, if I thought that person was pretty amazing, then I'm going to be sad, Or it just belittles the person that you're sad about not having in your life.
So all of these things that you have brought up, all these things we've talked about, what it does is actually diminishes how they're feeling in that moment. Like, we're trying to add something just to take a little bit of pain away or to help. But what we're really doing is not letting them be where they're at.
Yes.
And that is, I think going forward, I hope listeners are able to start, and we're able to look at the things that we say and think, am I allowing this person to be where they're at? And how can I love on them well so they don't have to be there long term, but not trying to make a change right there.
Right. Not trying to make them switch their feelings or their thoughts around it in that moment, 100%. Because it's exactly what you said. Like, we're invalidating their feelings and their thoughts. And we're also at times setting expectations on their lives. They're like, okay, I just finished this one thing and now I have this expectation of now I have to go and do something else. And, but that's not what we're wanting to do. Like, we're wanting to love that person really well. And one of the things you were talking about made me think about this quote. And I actually I've said it before, that I'll love you where you are, but I love you too much to let you stay there. And that can sound harsh at first, but if you've talked to somebody for a long time over something, if they are just becoming obsessive in their thought process, or they're becoming more and more depressed, more and more of a hermit, more and more withdrawn, you can say that phrase and it can bring tears to somebody's eyes. Like, you're going to walk this road with me? Yes, I'm going to be here. Like, I'm going to love you right here, but I'm not going to let you stay here because I love you that much. And sometimes we do have to say the hard things, but that's just kind of a mindset to have when you're approaching
and I think that also comes to the point where that really makes an impact is when somebody authentically cares about that person in a way that they have sat in it with them for a little while. Mm-hmm. Because if you say that right out of the gates,
right.
You hear somebody's pain and you say that right out of the gates, then that is not going to bring tears to their eyes. That's going to be like,
well, I'm not talking to you
anymore. I'm not talking to you about it anymore.
Yes.
You apparently have an opinion about how I'm going through this. Mm-hmm. So I'm either going to fake it when I'm around you, even though the pain's still going to be there. I'm going to act like it's not.
Yes.
Or I'm going to avoid you altogether.
Yes.
But when you sit with someone for a while in it, then that is a very compassionate thing to say. Mm-hmm. So it's where you're at with them.
Yes, absolutely. So, bad advice that we don't want to say anymore. And realizing if somebody gives us advice that's hurtful, it's probably just because it's routine. They're not trying to hurt us. It's just routine. It's just what you say. It's just what is a phrase that people use in that situation. So,
yeah, good topic.
I hope this is helpful. And if you have some good advice, tips, and phrases to share with other people, please pass those along. We would love for you to visit us at www.liveyourdesign.life to hear about our coaching businesses, and also, if it's before July 28th, to sign up for our marriage retreat that we're going to be having August 27th through the 29th. You can definitely sign up past that day, but the hotel will hold our rooms until July 28th. So go to liveyourdesign.life, go to our events page, and you can find out all of the information about the marriage retreat we're hosting in Charleston, South Carolina.